I'm Nick. You can tell I'm in the United Kingdom. What's that? You can hear me? Yeah. You can tell I'm in the United Kingdom because it's dark outside, and you can also see my hair. I haven't had a haircut in about 4 or 5 months because we've been in lockdown, and I should never have left Perth. I'm the Chief Sustainability Officer for the NHS. The NHS, we have a pretty big responsibility. We have carbon emissions about the same size as the entire country of Denmark or Croatia. We have a budget annually, 133 billion or so. We are the 5th largest employer in the world, and we are the world's first healthcare system to turn around and say, hey, I think climate change is a big problem. In fact, I think the climate crisis is a health crisis, and we're going to commit to a net zero target, 2040, the NHS, for the emissions we control directly. For the broader emissions that we don't control, but we can definitely influence, 2045. And if we do it right, we're going to bring that date forward. So I've got 5 minutes and I've got 3 key points. I'm going to be quick. I'm going to talk about why, I'm going to talk about what, and I'm going to talk about how. Why would the NHS do this? What exactly is a net zero healthcare system, and how on earth are we going to make sure that we deliver this? So this first slide here that you can see up probably gives you a good sense of the why. Oh, no, go back one. Pretty picture with a kid. Gives you a good sense of the why. 3 reasons. Because number one, we pay attention to the science. We know that climate change is the biggest global health threat of the 21st century. We know that left unmitigated, it disrupts healthcare systems. It disrupts the provision of healthcare. In the United Kingdom, we're very worried about overheating of our social care facilities, of our hospitals, about flooding and the mental health and long-term sequelae that you see there. And we're very worried about what it does to our supply chain. We also know, because we listen to the science, that the response to climate change can be this enormous opportunity for public health. We talked about those 8.4 million deaths as a result of the combustion of fossil fuel. We care about that. We care about the health of our patients outside of the 4 walls of a hospital, and we know that we have a responsibility as health professionals to act on that. The very third reason, and often forgotten but very important, I think, the NHS is an organisation of 1.3 million people. It's enormous. Because it's so big, our staff matter enormously to us because they are what determine how we deliver healthcare. So we're going to do what our staff want to do. As it turns out, 9 in 10 staff, 9 out of 10, when you poll them year after year, say they want to see the NHS act more sustainably. They think it's part of the core business of what the NHS has to do. So that's the why. The next slide will tell you about the what. This is our carbon footprint. This tells you everything we are going to do to get to net zero. All of the different breakdowns in the pie chart there, you can see how it sort of splits up across the entire system. You can see a bit of a heat map there. You know, to some extent, it broadly follows what you would expect. It follows economic activity. It follows the intensity of healthcare. Couple of broad things stick out to me. Number one, we are taking a very broad scope. Not just the direct emissions that we would consume from our energy, not just our buildings, not just the pharmaceuticals that we consume, but broader, because we know that we're a big employer and we have a big responsibility. We're also taking account and responsibility for the emissions that come from our patients, from visitors, from travel to and from the NHS, and from emissions well beyond the borders of the United Kingdom. What we call our sort of scope 3, our entire supply chain. And that's that huge chunk there you can see in blue. That's our scope 3 emissions, our supply chain. Now, we've broken it up because I kind of think it's disempowering to think of that as a supply chain. It's not just a supply chain, because a supply chain is made up of people, 1.3 million of them. It's made up of chefs and caterers that decide what they're going to purchase. It's made up of nurses and pharmacists and doctors that decide what they're going to prescribe, and physios that decide what kind of mobility aid a patient needs when they go home. The third thing I think that comes out of this diagram is that there are emissions everywhere, which is kind of terrifying. I think it's a bit of an oversimplification to sometimes think about the problem as just coal-fired power or just energy. Terrifying to see that there are emissions across the entire system, also empowering, because it means that it's everyone's responsibility, which means that there's 1.3 million people there that can act on this. Now, the next slide, we've talked about the why, we've talked about the what, the how. Net zero by 2040 for the emissions we control directly, 2045 for the ones that we have the ability to influence. That's a long way away. So we've set ourselves an 80% reduction target, 2028 at the earliest, and that is soon. That's in a couple of years. We will no longer, within the decade, the NHS, or £133 billion, will no longer purchase from any company that does not meet or exceed our commitments on climate change. Just 2 days ago, we approved a national design for a hydrogen ambulance, what will be the world's very, very first zero-emission ambulance. We're going to prototype it. We're going to try to drive it from London to Glasgow in time for COP26 at the end of this year. We have some exciting things in the estate. We're building 40 new hospitals in the NHS. We have a commitment. Those are not going to be old, outdated forms of hospitals. They're going to be new net zero hospitals. And we have a new approved net zero standard for hospitals that we're going to be building in the future. And we also have some boring things, hundreds and hundreds of millions of pounds, but boring. It pays back quickly. Shift your lighting, shift how you're heating your facilities, shift to LEDs, shift away from, believe it or not, coal, oil boilers towards combined heating power, more community integrated heating. It's boring, but it's pretty simple. And we have a new team. 10 years the NHS has been working on health and climate change, an impressive amount of effort from a group called the Sustainable Development Unit. That group has succeeded, and its work is transforming into a new, rapidly and significantly expanding greener NHS team. No longer a team of 5, 6 out in Cambridge, now a team of 150, 175 scattered across the entire country with a heck of a challenge to deal with. So I've got one more slide and then I'll stop because I promised I'd be quick, eh? That's the why, that's the what, that's the how. The final slide asks a question that we were asked very, very early on. Should we really be doing this? There's a global pandemic. Should the NHS really, in the middle of COVID-19, be responding to climate change as well? Don't we have enough to deal with? And the response is absolutely stop asking stupid questions. The NHS has to respond to climate change and COVID at the same time. It doesn't have a choice because we understand that the same inequalities, the same social environmental drivers that shift patterns of disease and mortality from COVID are the same things that are driving climate change. And it would be a little bit ridiculous if you solved one crisis whilst making the second worse. Thank you.
That was terrific. Thank you so much, Nick. Clearly, I mean, for those who don't know, the NHS has been, as Nick alluded to, working on this for 10 or 12 years now. They have already some runs on the board. They've got their carbon footprint down by about 20%, saved, I think, about £2 billion. And then this plan, as Nick has set out, accompanied by like a 70-page, plan as to how they're actually going to get there, and a whole series, a raft of initiatives. So they're attacking it really from all angles. So it's really admirable. And Nick, I'd like to come back to you, not just now, but in a minute, and ask about what do you think have been the biggest drivers for that success, and what can we do in Australia? But first, just to go around the panel for your reflections on Nick's comments. Courtney, to you first, and then Dan and Tim. Courtney.
Well, Nick and I were chatting before the call, and he asked me why I was starting to convene a whole bunch of people here in Canada into a green healthcare collective. And I told him it was his fault, because as soon as he made these announcements, my inbox flooded. And so what we see from that is how inspired humans are by other humans. We're very, very much social animals, and we're competitive. So all of a sudden, I have a mailing list of like almost 100 people, with more people pouring in. We're trying to figure out on the fly how we're going to manage this. And we've got 10 provinces and 3 territories and a tremendous number of medical systems within that. So we don't have the same consolidated structure as the NHS, but certainly the plan that he put forward, the 70-page plan that Kate was referring to, it lays out a groundwork that allows you to visualize how it becomes possible. So I think that the more we all begin to make the same asks of our suppliers, Nick was saying that they're telling their suppliers that within the decade, the NHS simply won't purchase from suppliers who don't have the same sustainability commitments as them. If we say the same thing in Canada, and the Canadian Medical Association did commit to doing what they can do to achieve a net zero healthcare system in Canada by 2050. So if we're saying the same thing in Canada and you're saying the same thing in Australia, that's going to put global pressure on these suppliers to clean up their supply chain. And I think that's the kind of thing that global solidarity that CODA and other similar organizations can generate can help to accomplish.
Terrific. Thanks, Courtney. Dan or next?
I agree with Courtney. I thought that commitment to not doing business with suppliers who don't have the same level of ambition that the NHS does is extraordinary, really. And it'll have huge impacts in Australia. I mean, we know how big the medical supply industry is in Australia. And funnily enough, when you go and talk to investors about the companies where they see the biggest climate risk, it's always focused about the fossil fuels and about, people involved in electricity generation and transport and so on. But they wouldn't look at a CSL, for instance, and think, oh, it's got climate risk. Well, if CSL fails to act on climate, and then everybody on its supply chain says, well, we're not going to do business with you unless you have the same ambition, then that manifests itself as a climate risk. And that's extraordinary to me.
Thanks, Dan. Tim?
Brilliant talk, thank you. And thank you for a decade of effort in that area. What I think I took from that was there is no silver bullet. There is no one technology, there's not one solution. There's a whole range of solutions, and whether it's your lighting or whether it's your heating, your cars, your building design, all of it combined can solve the problem amazingly fast and save money and save the future of the planet. So why would you not do it? But there's no one silver bullet. There's a myriad of things we can do immediately today.
Yeah. Okay, Nick, so back to you. What's your advice for us? What have been the biggest drivers? How have you got there? How have you, progressed things so well? And you've managed, as you said, to really make the case that this work needs to continue and, in fact, be strengthened despite what else is happening. So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, no good, coherent answer. It was messy. Things went wrong, and that was okay. I think looking back on it, you can maybe put some, nice rose-tinted, framework and say, oh, well, clearly we did these 7 things, and it was very, very intelligent, and aren't we smart? Number one, though, and I've said this 3 or 4 times, 1.3 million. It's a lot of people. The NHS's biggest asset is its staff, is the nurses, or the physios, or the pharmacists, or the doctors, are the caterers that make it up. When 1.3 million staff within the NHS want to do something, they get it done. And if you look around at what happened over the last 10 years, that's really what was going on. It was very, very slowly. There was growing momentum from NHS staff. Now, the reason that happened is because success breeds success. People like to be part of something that is positive. They like to be part of something that is growing. They like to be part of something where they feel like they can do, right? If you're scared, if you're worried, if you're annoyed about climate change, the one thing that I guarantee will make you feel better is if you do something about it. So if you wake up the next morning, Thursday morning for me, Friday morning for you guys, do something about it. Saturday morning, do it again. Sunday morning, do 2 things. Monday morning, take a break. Tuesday morning, do 3 things. I think the final thing that probably helped the NHS the whole way through this is every time, no matter what, this is not a climate change initiative. We're not doing this just because of the climate. We're doing this because the core business of the NHS is to provide healthcare, free of access, point of care for everyone now, but for future generations as well. And if you take that seriously, and that's the motto of the NHS, we've been around for 70 years or so, in order to do that, you have to respond to climate change. You literally just can't meet that motto unless you have a planet to do so on. And so understanding all of these things as health interventions, cleaner air, healthier diets, physical activity, I think that's probably been the core of a lot of this. Courtney's smiling. I don't know why, but she found something funny.
My daughter snuck in and I was trying to talk through gritted teeth. No, we can't have that.
Thanks, Nick. So just to pick up on a couple of those things, I think those are two really important points, because for health professionals, this is our core business. This is what, this is our job, taking care of people and improving the health of our patients and our communities. And so it's really aligned with those values. And I think, as Nick has said, in instances where we can tap into that, it works really well. I'd also Courtney often uses the phrase, action feels much better than anxiety. So Courtney, do you want to just to touch on that? The importance of action.
That's true. And, I've been saying that for a long time. I have a slide that I made 7 years ago, maybe, and I've had it in every single presentation, and it's been tweeted out almost every time. And so I know that really resonates. And when I finally went to the psychology of climate change literature, turns out that's an evidence-based statement. So I was happy to know that I was, actually being accurate. So it really does work. And there's a slide in the presentation coming up that it's very much additive. And so I find that we're bandwagon jumpers, and people love it when they see success. And so for a long time, when I was trying to get people involved, I would try to get them to do presentation, like do rounds on climate change. But then get them to get the Canadian Medical Association to divest from. This really launched. And so we're action-oriented people, I think, particularly in critical care. And when we ask people to do stuff, we're very capable, and people learn fast, and we have big impact.